Before the world knew something was wrong, before news headlines mourned his passing, Sheila E. felt it in her bones. Prince was afraid, but not of illness or death. He feared a deeper darkness looming over the music world, the kind that couldn't be cured with medicine or evaded with fame. In her own words, Sheila said there were no signs of substance abuse, no reckless behavior, and yet Prince's end came abruptly. That contradiction haunted her. Their story wasn't just an industry friendship, it was a tale of creative fusion, vulnerability, and profound trust. They first crossed paths in 1977. Sheila's father, Pete Escovedo, a musician in his own right, met Prince while recording with Carlos Santana. By 1984, Sheila was working with Prince on The Glamorous Life, her debut solo album under Warner Brothers, and joining him on the now legendary Purple Rain tour. The two shared a rare closeness. At one point, on stage during a live performance, Prince turned to her and mouthed, "Will you marry me?" It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't a stunt. It was real. Despite public rumors of tension later in life, especially after Sheila's autobiography, sources close to her confirmed that she and Prince had quietly rekindled their connection. In their final conversations, Prince reportedly opened up like never before. Not about his catalog or fame, but about forces he feared were manipulating the industry from within. Among those he named was Sean Diddy Combs. Prince had spent decades warning about the music business's twisted architecture. He railed against ownership structures, against contracts that stripped artists of identity and freedom. But near the end, his warnings turned more specific. It wasn't just about labels anymore. It was about people, individuals helping construct a new, more sinister system. Diddy, Prince believed, was one of them. The warning made little sense at first. Diddy was a mogul, a self-made empire in motion. But as federal investigations began to name him in connection with coercion, abuse, and manipulation, Sheila E.'s words and Prince's paranoia began to sound more like prophecy than suspicion. And then came Cassie's testimony, the revelation that shook everything. In court documents, Cassie described an incident at Prince's private estate. She'd been invited to one of his exclusive events, a place known in the industry not as a party, but as a refuge. No paparazzi, no contracts, just a space where artists could breathe. Cassie, who had long been under Diddy's control, reportedly didn't tell him she was attending. She knew he wouldn't allow it. It was Prince's house, a place that stood for everything Diddy couldn't own. When Cassie walked in, it felt magical. Artists mingling, executives chatting, music pulsing. But the moment someone whispered that Diddy had arrived, everything shifted. Cassie panicked. She fled. Later, she testified that she recognized the look on his face, the one that came before violence. She made it to her hotel, locked the door, and braced herself. Hours later, Diddy allegedly broke into her room and assaulted her. Not over jealousy, over disobedience. Over a decision to walk into a space he couldn't dominate. And this was what Prince feared. He had watched the industry recycle its chains. While Prince fought for autonomy, Diddy allegedly built his empire by becoming a new kind of master, offering fame in exchange for silence, controlling artists with wealth, contracts, and fear. Prince didn't just see it happening, he warned people about it, privately, urgently. His famous battles with Warner Music Group were only part of the story. Signed at 18, Prince fought relentlessly to own his name, his work, his legacy. At one point, he even abandoned his own name, adopting an unpronounceable symbol while scrawling "slave" on his face. To him, that was the only way to rebel against a system that profited off his very identity. But in the early 2000s, Prince noticed a disturbing shift. Warner Music struck a lucrative deal with Bad Boy Records, the label founded by Diddy. Under that contract, Warner distributed music for Diddy's artists and held a 50% stake in Bad Boy. What Warner once withheld from Prince, they freely gave to someone he believed was working against everything he'd stood for. To Prince, Diddy wasn't escaping the system, he was reinforcing it. Worse, he was modernizing its tools, NDAs, secret footage, coercion. Prince began referring to the music industry as a plantation, not metaphorically, literally. He warned that most artists would never own their music, and even fewer would survive the game intact. Contracts were just the beginning. The real control came through fear. He watched artists under Diddy's label crumble, nervous breakdowns, public meltdowns, artists discarded when their usefulness expired. It wasn't coincidence, it was a cycle, a machine. And Diddy, Prince believed, wasn't just caught in its gears, he was engineering it. That's why Prince began building something new. His infamous 3,121 parties weren't just elite gatherings, they were sanctuaries, carefully curated, deeply intentional, and completely off the grid, for artists looking for relief from the industry industry, it was salvation. And Diddy's presence at one of them, that wasn't an accident, that was infiltration. For Cassie, it became a memory burned into her bones. For Prince, it was confirmation that his safe spaces were no longer safe. After that night, those close to Prince say he changed. He tightened access at Paisley Park. He withdrew from public life. He refused interviews, skipped award shows, and doubled security. Even longtime friends found themselves locked out. He didn't say why, but he didn't have to. Shortly before his death, Prince posted a cryptic image online. The caption read, "Just when you thought you were safe." It was deleted within hours, but the words lingered, ominous and raw. By the time he passed away, Prince wasn't just an icon, he was a man haunted by a truth he couldn't fully share. In the aftermath, officials ruled his death an accidental overdose from fentanyl-laced pills. But friends, collaborators, and fans have never accepted that explanation. They insist Prince didn't use drugs recklessly. He was careful, disciplined, obsessed with control, especially over his body. The narrative didn't fit the man, but it did fit a larger pattern. Deleted messages, sealed documents, people suddenly unwilling to speak, closure without answers. And then, years later, came Sheila E. Speaking softly but firmly, she began sharing fragments of what Prince had told her, about fear, about power, about the people hiding behind the industry's velvet curtains. She didn't name names, but her tone said enough. And with Diddy's indictment and Cassie's claims now public, everything fits together in eerie clarity. Prince wasn't just battling the labels, he was fighting those using fame to enforce silence, to trap artists, to erase their voices. He saw private parties become tools of control, invitations turned into leashes, footage turned into threats. That's why he fought so hard to keep his gatherings free of that influence. He wasn't trying to build a legacy, he was trying to protect a generation. Sources close to him now say he kept notes, detailed records of who attended his parties, what they did, who they tried to approach. He watched, documented, guarded, not for fame, for truth. And that's what made him dangerous, because when someone builds freedom, it reveals everyone else's cage. Even comedian Cat Williams, who later claimed Prince quietly mentored him, has hinted that Prince warned him about names and faces that were deeper than any contract dispute. Not labels, not CEOs, but real people, industry royalty, who controlled narratives, collected secrets, and built power through silence. Prince's warnings weren't abstract, they were direct, and Cassie's story now acts as confirmation that those warnings weren't paranoid, they were protective. In the years after Prince's death, many tried to claim his legacy. Rock Nation reportedly made moves on his unreleased vault catalog. Rumors swirled that some wanted to profit off the empire he'd tried so hard to separate from the mainstream. But even in death, Prince resisted. He knew what access meant, and he knew that once certain people gained access, they didn't just take your music, they took your voice. And for those who still think his fears were exaggerated, Cassie's story proves otherwise. When she saw Diddy at Prince's party and fled, that was the intersection of two worlds, one built on art, the other on intimidation. Prince wasn't just creating an alternative scene, he was offering an escape, and for that, he became a threat. His spaces weren't inclusive by accident, they were fortresses, places where you didn't trade your soul for a single. And as the lawsuits against Diddy pile up, and as more artists speak out about coercion, blackmail, and abuse, Prince's message cuts through the noise. He warned us, he gave us the blueprint, and now it's finally being heard.